Alrighty, so I'm going to talk about how I broke free from the narcissist abuse that I was experiencing for most of my life. My last video I talked about surviving 40 years of narcissistic abuse. Now I want to share with you how I broke free and ultimately regained my life back. So the very first thing I did was I quit drinking alcohol and smoking weed. So you have to get sober, because if you're not sober, you're not able to process your emotions and cope with whatever emotional trauma you've experienced throughout your life, and you'll always live in a state of escaping your feelings. So in order to break free from the narcissistic abuse that you're experiencing, you have to get sober, because it's through that point of clarity that you're able to understand and realize what's happening to you. So I broke free from all my drug addictions with a year of no contact from my narcissistic mother. And I did it unknowing. I wasn't aware of the narcissistic abuse I was experiencing from her, but she was such a, she was so focused on everything I was doing in my life and micromanaging everything, that it came to the point of, I was so depressed. I was drinking and smoking constantly, and I was escaping everything in my life, and she wasn't helping at all. All she was doing was just pushing me further and further towards escaping and my depression, and ultimately just my downward spiral in life. So out of just hitting rock bottom and going into survival mode, I just cut her off completely for a year, and then that all that pressure got relieved that I was experiencing from her, and I was able to stop drinking and stop smoking weed. And I can talk more about exactly how I did that, but that was the very first thing, and I think the most important, because if you're always escaping your emotions, you're never able to cope and ultimately understand and heal from emotional trauma. So the second thing I did was I started kind of at the top of the list of these, relationships and emotional traumatic experiences that I had experienced throughout my young adulthood and adulthood. And I kind of I went to these people, I tracked them down, I tracked down this ex-girlfriend who I'd been with for a while, and I never processed our relationship, and it kind of resulted in, her cheating and leaving, and, I couldn't process it in a healthy way, and that's where I really started to drink heavily. And so I found her, and I went and spoke with her, and I basically just said, hey, I forgive you for whatever you did to me. And what I realized about that, it really wasn't about me forgiving her, but it was about me forgiving myself. And so what I think the second thing is how you can break free from this narcissistic abuse and all these in this cycle, is you got to be able to forgive yourself for mistakes that you've made. So I think that's number 2, is practice self-reflection, and then just forgive yourself, because everyone makes mistakes, and it's easy to hold yourself responsible for things in your life that maybe are pushing you in negative directions. So I think that is key to moving forward. Just forgive yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. That was number 2. Number 3 was I had achieved sobriety. I was clear in my mind. I was forgiving people in my life that I feel had wronged me, ultimately just forgiving myself. Next thing was I began to want to gain understanding about people in my life that were just negative. Why are these people, why do I have an aversion to my mother? Why are members of my family, why do I feel like I just don't like them? What's going on with them? So I started to research and try to understand, human behavior, behavioral issues, and this is where you can use, psychology and the different, sciences of human behavior to just gain an understanding. I don't think ultimately it's the cure for these problems, but it does give you, gives you terms, and it kind of categorizes behavior of people and things that people do, so you can understand. So through that understanding, I'm trying to understand why people do what they do and what this behavior means. That's how I came to understand and learn about narcissism and how my mom is this raging narcissist. And once I gained the understanding about what narcissism is, and I began to delve into it deeper, and really all this information is free. There's a ton of it on YouTube, and then there's books, there's behavioral studies that people have done, and you really have to gain the knowledge, because then you can see so clearly. Because the biggest trick the narcissist plays on people is they keep them, it's the gaslighting. They keep them in this weird altered reality of always questioning, what is real and what's not. And so once you gain that understanding about narcissism and the behavioral patterns and ultimately what drives these people, you can see everything that they do. So now, I know that narcissists' biggest weak thing is that everything's patterns for them. It's always a cycle. It's always, nothing changes. They're just doing the exact same thing over and over and over again. And they just try it on different people. If you're one of their sources of supply, they just do the same thing to you over and over again. It's just trained behavior. So their weak point is really the fact that they just do everything in a pattern. You can always expect something to reoccur. So that would be the third thing to do, is start understanding human behavior and use psychology and these kind of medical definitions to gain an understanding. Because then you can know, is this person a narcissist? Are they kind of on the narcissistic spectrum? Are they just are they just a terrible person in general? And maybe they're, more psychotic, maybe they're more kind of like bipolar, maybe, there's all these things that they could be. But it'll help you understand who you're dealing with. And if you're in fact dealing with a narcissist, you can learn the terminology, you can learn the behavioral patterns, and then you can deduce who you're dealing with. Because if someone is actively trying to destroy your life, or they're just acting as an agitator in your life, it's important to understand the behavioral patterns, and that's how you'll know what you're dealing with. So that was the third thing I did. And I'd say those three things: getting sober, practicing forgiveness of myself and other people, that I feel treated me poorly, and then understanding what the definitions for these behavioral issues that people exhibit. Once you do that, you're going down the right road. That's the whole thing. It's like knowledge is power. Once your mind is free and you're starting to heal, and then you're armed with the insight into these behavioral patterns, then you really start getting control and you can break free. So that's the blueprint. I can talk more about it, deeper. I can go deeper into each topic, but that's how I did it. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you got any questions, just leave me a comment or email me, whatever's fine. And yeah, I'll talk to you later.